Hello and welcome to Martini's Eco and Country Bites. My name is Martine Shepherd, and today I have some very esteemed guests that's going to be joining me on Edge Radio Australia and this segment, which is called Aussies United Against Offshore Wind. So I'm going to bring all my guests on stage, all these lovely gentlemen. I was just saying previously, I'm not sure if I'm the thorn and the roses or the rose and the thorns here, gentlemen, but welcome to Martini's Eco Bites and Edge Radio Australia. This has been a long time coming.
Thanks for having us on.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martine, for organising this. It's a great opportunity for all of us.
Cheers,
I couldn't
Martine.
agree more. Thank you. I know that we've wanted to do this for quite some time, but, you know, with all good things that we wait for, we're going to have an amazing discussion now after certain events, obviously, that have unfolded over the last 6 months, and certainly many of us who've got to meet each other face to face and gone through some of the processes. So I'd like to welcome to our segment today, we have Kush Allison from Save the Bass in Tasmania. We have Michael Neo from Victoria, from the Warrnambool and Port Fairy area. Ben Abbott from New South Wales in the Port Stephens area. We have Alex O'Brien from the Illawarra area. And then, of course, there's myself just representing Western Australia, which is Save Our Beloved Geograph Bay, as well as I'm always representing Keep Kalbarri Beautiful. I would like to ask Michael, if you'd like to sort of introduce yourself and have a chat about how you became involved, what's going on in your area, and some of the feasibility licenses that may be already given out, if there's a pause on that, where things are at.
Thanks, Martine. Look, I guess the origin of my involvement was when a community member came to me and was looking for someone just to, I guess, facilitate a rally and use my networks. I'm formally been involved with local government, so I've had quite a bit of experience around advocacy. So the community came to me asking me to facilitate the rally. That went really well. We got a lot of publicity and awareness, and I was happy to step back after that, but the community wouldn't let me. So I'm here for the long run, and we've actually had an area that's been declared and a feasibility licence for about a third of that declared area. The project's called Spinifex, and about 70 plus turbines at this point. Obviously, we've written a number of submissions as part of the process, and in particular with the Senate inquiry, we're very disappointed with the consultation. And one of the local Indigenous groups has actually stated that they've been forced to be part of this process now, even though they haven't been given consent. So that's a real concern for us. And we've got really good support. Our local member, who is now also the opposition and spokesman for energy and emissions reduction. So we'll certainly be talking to him as a group with you guys around what our concerns are.
Wow, Michael, that's a lot. And I'm really glad that you've given a great synopsis of exactly your background and where this sits right now. If we can perhaps revisit, because this is where we have all sort of come from the same positioning, where the consultation process completely failed in most areas across Australia. Could you kind of recap on what it looks like for you and your community? Because we've had some discussion between myself and Kush, Alex, as well as Ben, but yourself, I haven't had an opportunity to discuss that or put that forward. What did that look like for your community, whether it happened or not?
Yeah, look, in terms of the consultation, it was just lacking in terms of promotion and awareness. Also, the information that was provided was lacking. We believed that there should have been a comprehensive environmental impact study done before any consultation, so that we knew what we were facing in terms of, you know, the environment, and also the impact of all the preliminary surveying, any, sounds and stuff that impact on our whale nursery here. We've also got a significant whale nursery, which is of real concern, and I think that's been overlooked. when the minister declared the zone, he basically found an area that wasn't suitable, so just kicked the can down the road to our area. So it's probably an area that if you threw a dart at a dartboard, you would pick, but you certainly wouldn't pick it on environmental grounds in terms of the environment. And that's one of our biggest issues. We're not necessarily against renewables, it's the project location. So we believe that the information that was provided at the sessions wasn't thorough enough for, number one, the community to provide really good feedback on.
Yeah, I'm just showing the area here that that is the declared zone, and this is the project that's being given feasibility, I believe, Michael, that you've just discussed. I think that the consultation process across the board has been a complete failure, which is why just before election, they certainly cancelled on us as we're all there in Canberra together. They cancelled that inquiry because it was going to look so incredibly bad for this government. What would you say in what the community is requesting strongly that the government not only review but come and consult with them face to face again and complete that consultation process in a manner that should have been done prior, as normal environmental assessment is done in the past, is that an industry would never be introduced into an environment or into an area without having an thorough environmental impact assessment and full consultation with all groups and stakeholders that had their concerns. What would you say now to the federal government to say these are the major concerns that you have not addressed?
Yeah, look, I think they need to pause the process, because the process going forward is a facilitation process. It doesn't really give an opportunity for the community to have a second round of say, particularly the Indigenous community. As I said, they've been forced into a process where they haven't even provided consent yet. I would say that they need to actually get some scientific evidence. The minister actually moved the zone towards our end because of the environment, but those exact environmental issues are also our issues. So, you know, we need to go back to step one, go back to the community, get some good data before the minister starts spruiking jobs, community benefits and things like that, because that's creating an expectation that it's going to happen. You can't actually pick a zone without having some sort of environmental impact statement. It's just not appropriate.
Couldn't agree more. I think that they've not only put the cart before the horse, but they've greatly underestimated the pushback that they're going to get from not only immediate local communities, but Australia-wide. And certainly we can see with all of our faces here and many, many more, unfortunately, that weren't able to join us, like a representative from Gippsland tonight or today couldn't join us. But all I can say is that this federal government has greatly underestimated the passion with which those that are well informed and have done their due diligence and research have pushed back. And I think that that's being seen from your community also, Michael. Do you feel at any point that there has been a social license given?
Oh, sorry, could you just repeat that?
Do you feel at any point that there is a social license that has been given to move forward this in your community?
100% no. We've asked local government to run, I guess, not a referendum, but as part of the local council elections, they could have asked a question of the community on whether they supported or not. They declined to do that. We had another council that actually ran a community survey where 90% of the community said they do not support the offshore wind farm. So, you know, I think in terms of council saying it's not our responsibility, certainly when the transmission lines hit the land, they will have to be involved in the planning. So I think, you know, it's unfair for the councils to say that it's not their responsibility when the community have voiced really strongly in large numbers that they oppose it.
That's incredibly disappointing that your local councils have completely wiped their hands of any sense of accountability, responsibility. Michael, I'm sorry to hear that. Our local councils here that were heavily impacted have both spoken out and don't support it, which I'm grateful for. Very different legislation or council acts in place for Western Australia as opposed to other states, unfortunately, because they're more accountable here because we can hold special electors meetings, unlike you guys over there on the East Coast, you can't. So we did hold our council accountable for that, and they did vote and put out a notification that they don't support it. Michael, moving forward, where are things sitting right now about the impact and where this goes? What is the biggest risk?
Look, I think the biggest risk to the environment is certainly the migration of our aquatic species. We're in whale season at the moment. We've got a lot of humpback whales that have been spotted between here and Portland and the South Australian border. And we've also spotted a southern right whale. We've got our fingers crossed that it's a calving mother. It's one of the most significant whale nurseries on the eastern coast because it's the repetitive nature of the calving mothers that come back year after year. Obviously, Victoria and New South Wales and the eastern coast have a population of about 300 individuals of southern right whales, and there's approximately 2,000 on the other side of Australia. So we haven't really recovered from the whaling days when they almost became extinct. So that's a real concern. Also, just the information that's been provided, in terms of visualisations, they're certainly not accurate. We've had people take photos of the heights and the scale of the turbines that are proposed for Gippsland, and they're certainly going to be very visible to our tourism towns, Port Fairy and Warrnambool. That's a real great concern. Our councils promote Warrnambool and Port Fairy as tourism centres. We don't want to see a energy plant in our oceans.
No, a whole industrialised zone in what is our blue zone, which is an area where people come to be calm and be soothed from the insanity of the rest of the world. That's why they choose these areas to come and be in these beautiful, pristine ocean environments. And this industrialisation will destroy it systematically, as we know. We're seeing this overseas. Look, Michael, I'd like to thank you for joining us. I know that you do have to go. Is there any last things you'd like to put forward or say tonight?
Look, I'd just like to thank everyone in this group. Together we can provide a united front. It's a very difficult task when you have a government that's ploughing ahead and not listening to the community. I would just say to the government, just take a step back, maybe pause, have a listen to the community, listen to our concerns, and we'll certainly be advocating to the opposition around our concerns as well. But well done to all the groups right across Australia. You're doing a great job. We're all volunteers, and we're very passionate about our communities and our environment, so well done.
And thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you very much for all of your support and always our love to your community down there. Anytime that people needing help and support, we're always there, just a message or a phone call away. So all the best, Michael, and hopefully we can get to chat again soon.
Yep, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, we're moving on. I'd just like to introduce Kush Allison from Tasmania. Perhaps, Kush, you could give me a bit of an overview of how you became involved, where things are sitting in the Bass Strait right now for offshore wind turbine zones.
Yeah, thanks, Martine, and hi, Ben and Alex. Well, I've got involved. It's a bit like Michael. I was elected as a councillor in 2018, and I also stood for the mayor of the Trove municipality in Port Royal, which upset. I pulled a fair bit of it. I pulled 20% of the vote, which upset a lot of people. From that, I was fairly in a toxic culture in the council, and I stood down due to the fraudulent deceptive behaviour and other things. But I didn't resign. So I didn't stand in 22, but I still signed my letters as I stood down, not resign the Trove councillor. And I stood down until there was an inquiry, and I want that inquiry nationally now. But linked to that, we have the transmissions lines going through Kentish, which we resource share. So the Nook Power Station is very prevalent to the whole Marinus link, which is what Tassie's involved in, which will be the connection to the mainland, which is only 750 megawatt. And it's up to about $6 billion now. And from that, we've got a local representative in our parliament, Craig Garland, who got elected last year, and he sort of pulled a few of us together that had been community members. And between it's a double edge down here in Tassie because we've got the salmon farms as well. So it's taken a while to convince the salmon farms to come in with the renewable energy zones, but they're both having blue economy CRC as their. So on that coastline, that's your renewable energy zones, but the whole coastline you're looking at in that picture has been permitted use for salmon farms as well. And
Wow.
Port Sorell, where I live for the last 30 years, is proposed for a salmon farm as well. So it could be the next Macquarie Harbour. I'll try not to marry the salmon in too much, but it is relevant when Blue Economy, CRC, the former CEO, and I don't know whether he still is CEO of the Renewable Energy Zone for Blue Economy, is now CEO of Salmon Tasmania as well. So it's really relevant. Now, there's over 3,000 wind turbines proposed for Bass Strait. And where we're talking up there at Port Fairy, Warrnambool, Gippsland, so, from Portland to Eden, back to the tips of Tassie, including Flinders and King Island, is what we're talking about. And after your interview with Megan Labb and the damage that the cables do and the windmills, I'm seriously believe that the damage they're going to do is way more than any salmon farm will do, except the salmon farms are disgusting as well. Just to go back to the salmon farm, because they've just started the trial, which is a $20 million trial funded by the federal government. Tassal have got the permission to do two trials, one for salmon and one, I think it's kingfish. And it's not good. And they're 12 k's offshore, but they told us at a forum the other day that you will see them from the hills of Burnie when you pay the houses and different things and the lights. Now, you link to that to the wind turbines. They're moving a bit further offshore, and they've decreased the amount, but I believe my figures at 3,000 will still be the case on going on capacity in gigawatt hours that they're proposing. At one stage, there was virtually 32 gigawatt of power being proposed for northern Tasmania. You guys would have 28 in various areas at yours. Australia only uses 32 gigawatt per hour. So we're doubling Australia's power supply in Bass Strait, all supposedly for Tassie's benefit. It'll just cost us. We've got hydro down here that has a capacity of about 2,600 megawatt per hour, and we only use about 1,300. The day we ran Unity and Community with Save Our Bass, and Martini was on that day, Tasmania was paying $100. What is it? The $100 retail, and Victoria was paying 61. Now, since then, we've been following the figures of the capacity. At one stage, Tassie was only producing 735 megawatts when we got capabilities of 2,600. What we're being used on, and this is the study that it's not really me. I'm sort of, because of my council background, I'm sort of, I'm a bit of a marry the people together, fill the room with smart people and make sure you're not the one. And that's sort of where we go. And we've got research that I believe, because hydro can be turned on and off generators, that Tassie will be there for the backup when Victoria's solar and wind and various things go down, just like happened in France, backed up Spain and Portugal the other day with their nuclear. And that's the only reason they need Tassie. And we did the original Basslink cable, which has cost us a fortune. Mm-hmm. And then that got a split and went down, and they've never told us who blew the cable up, how much it's cost. I've asked that in a public meeting.
So, Kush, is the Marinus link then the replacement for the Bass Strait link?
It's not a replacement. They're going to have both. They fixed the Basslink cable, and now they've just privatised the Basslink cable more. You owners have taken over, and they want a subsidy from the federal or state governments on. They want to get a set price, I believe. It's really bad. Now, then you get into the Australian Energy Market Operator, which that's where I've got a real concern, is because it's 40% owned by private enterprise, which is your AGLs and everyone like that. And then they're all, 50% plus owned by international investors. And it's the same people that own the gas, everything, and then they oversee the National Energy Regulator. So all the prices are fixed at whatever they did. So Tassie, 5 years ago, we were producing power for about $30 a megawatt. Now, find it back at 70 for someone that's just got to switch a switch and convert it. And Tassie's prices, and I wish I'd done this by now, but I intend to do it over the last 20 years, I believe, have doubled in power prices. And we run on renewable energy. We've got another 600 available through other resources, the gas at Tamer. It's all up. We've got over 3,000 megawatt hours Tasmania has access to, and we only use about 1,300. And places like Camalco and the zinc works in Hobart, Nossie Nord in Norfolk, the paper mill has just shut down. So those big power users are going. There was 4 companies that utilise over 50% of our power. I think Camalco gets a phenomenal amount of power off us, and they get it for nothing virtually. And that deal was done again.
You had Liberty as well down at Bell Bay. Did they use some of that energy?
The gas energy you're talking about, or
we've got a smelter down
Camalco's.
there.
Camalco's, yeah, they would do, I would think.
Kush, maybe we have a chat about the consultation process that did or didn't happen down in Tasmania. What did that look like?
Well, Kim Haynes, that you missed at the Unity, she spoke first when I couldn't get my phone working. She put a submission into the state government. Craig lodged that in Parliament. We've got a response from it, and they virtually didn't take much notice of what she's there. The consultation process, again, back to that salmon meeting, they put an ad in the Saturday's Advocate on the Saturday morning or the Friday morning, and the community forum was on Monday at afternoon. We managed to get 60 or 70 of us there. And with the wind, the turbines last year, they had a meeting at UTAS, and 100 of us turned up, and that room had enough people to do any project you want in Tasmania. And they tried to kick us out, and they said the room's not licensed, Oc Health and Safety, the university's going to get rid of us and all this, and we stood our ground. But some had to go next door. They missed the chat. We got told all our questions would get answered. They never got answered. And then they started doing one-on-ones with various people from that meeting, including the ones that went put submissions in, and it was a railroad exercise, which is just normal, and I've been involved in that for over 20 years, just through local government. Watch how in that works, and it's the same operandi anyway, and it doesn't matter what they're doing. And wind turbines, wind farms, salmon farms, stadiums, you name it.
It all sits under the same agenda. And the thing is that the agenda,
on the 3rd of June, the state government just released, I think it's the 3rd of June, don't quote me on the day, just released how they're going to review the consultation process in the State Planning Commission. And if you do any abusive, or it's seen to be abusive, because they can take offence on anything that might even be just a little sarcastic comment.
Like calling someone Blackout Bowen.
They're not going to accept your submissions. Now, on top of this, the local government is now in Tassie trying to really stop us questioners going in. And Kenish and the Trove, Kenish has just banned 2 people from coming into the council chambers for 12 months, and they're not even allowed in the council offices.
I thought communism was alive and well in Victoria, but Tasmania, that seems like you're trying to overtake them there.
Well, we're catching up pretty quick, and we're at state election again now, as you probably all realise, so we can utilise a lot of what we can do here after about I reckon the last 2 to 3 weeks of the election to July, not the 19th, if we get the right media out, we'll get a say. We've got over 10 independents standing in Braddon, and I'm down in Hobart at the moment. I've spoken to 2, possibly 3 that are standing, and the majority of them are very, very well rehearsed. Some a lot better than I am. So if we can just get those independents in, Craig's made a big difference. I don't know whether any of you know Craig Garland, but he's a pretty smart cookie, and they can't answer his questions in Parliament. And he's he's a bit scruffy than I am too. So and he went down to Vinnie's and brought a jacket when he joined Parliament. So
look, having someone that has a brain in their head that knows how to ask the right questions is a huge part of how we get this under the spotlight, because as far as mainstream media goes, they're just defaulting completely to the greenwashing agenda. I mean, I know all areas are of the same opinion when we're having those conversations. There's very little mainstream media that will give airplay to something that is respectfully and well represented as truth and impartiality. Kush, do you think that as far as social license goes, that there is any in Tasmania for this?
The social licence, yes. The thing is, like, again, the salmon farms and the wind farms, no one knows really how bad they are. So they're all promoting the jobs, and you want to close down the salmon industry. No one wants to close down any industry. We want it to just be regulated properly. Where the salmon industry, when it first opened in the 80s, no one complained. We were supportive. It was going to create jobs, do this, the usual banter. But then through the lack of regulation, through EPA and our politicians just changing acts and everything to suit, the week before the election, the Prime Minister changed the Environmental Biodiversity and Conservation Act to allow the salmon to keep going directly in Macquarie 1 week before he called the election. And here in Tassie, where it goes to the Craig's questions and others into Parliament, it's very hard. Last Wednesday, Craig called a media release, a media meeting to the gates of the Moranis project. And there was about 25, 30 of us there. The local paper didn't turn up, the Advocate, but the ABC, Channel 7 and the Mercury in Hobart turned up. And they did. The Channel 7 did a great report, plus there was another 5 or 6 speakers from the community, different groups that spoke, and the Channel 7 put most of them up on the screen as well. But the lack of interest, and there was no other politicians turned up, I think Jackie Lambie had one of her people there, but I think she was more interested in spying on the event than talking to us about what the benefits and the cost versus benefit. I'm big on cost versus benefit. If you give me a cost versus benefit analysis and a long range, what it's all going to do in 20 years and what we're going to do with these massive wind turbines and everything like that, you got that solution, well, you'll get your social license. So back to your question, but
that's the first question that you ask is decommissioning. What is the budget for decommissioning? And when they can't give you a straight answer and say decommissioning costs will equate to the cost of plus 20 to 30% of what the installation was. If it doesn't say that, then it's BS.
Plus 20 or 30 to what the installation cost. Is that what you just said, Marta?
I said it will be representative, whatever the installation cost, decommissioning will be the same amount plus 20 to 30%.
Yeah, that's great numbers there. I'm glad we've got an understanding on that. Definitely. Mm-hmm. And that will be left with governments because the companies all go bankrupt just before they've got to be decommissioned. I mean, it's a common thing with everything you watch.
Yeah.
And our politicians are the Premier and the Planning Minister are both members of Braddon, both live in the Trove, the same township that I represent as a councillor. The Premier and the Leader of the Opposition replied to my invite to speak at Unity, which I was very respectful of, and the Premier wished us every success with the event. So I think it was fairly successful. We've still got a lot to do with the media from that event. But the Energy Minister, who's in Bass, Nick Dugan, and I'll mention his name because he used to run the fishing show. Was it Hook, Line and Sinker? I can't even remember what it was called. So he should be right for the environment. He won't turn up to any of our meetings. He won't answer Craig's questions in Parliament. And Felix Ellis, the planning minister, won an election and they didn't want to come to a media conference that got a fair bit of exposure. Didn't want to come to Unity. You know, I got a lot of replies from council. I invited every councillor to Unity in the state. I invited every candidate and every politician. And many of them were very respectful with their replies, but many just ignored it.
Yeah,
And,
didn't turn up. No show.
And this is the big problem. So 30, 40 years ago, we had good access with our politicians. 10 years ago, it wasn't too bad. And then now they don't want to meet with you because we're in a low population state. It's very, you can get around it fairly quickly. But no, it's all just shut the doors now. Shut the doors and do not consult.
I think WA can quite well relate to that. Well, we often say we feel like the forgotten state, but we are certainly more aligned than they ever imagined. Kush, thank you for giving us that full spectrum.
No worries.
Gentlemen, do you have any questions for Kush? I know that Alex is pumping those ones there. It was great. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, no, look, I'm just interested, Kush, have they got a developer now for the area that's actually put a feasibility license?
Not yet on the wind turbines, but then when I saw that Port Fairy, well, you know, I'm talking Bass Strait, so yes, there is. I can say yes because Port Fairy's got it. So we're not just talking the coast of Tasmania. We've got to pull it in from virtually Portland to Eden and across, and expose Bass Strait to what it is. Everyone in the world sort of knows Bass Strait. It's one of the roughest stretches of water in the world because it's so shallow. And
I think this map here gives a very good overview of the devastation. This is Gippsland. I'm going to talk about it a little bit in a minute, but you're right, Kush, when it talks about the waters that join between Bass Strait and Victoria. My gosh, like it is a shit show. I'm not going to change. I'm very to the point on this show, and I'm not going to censor what this actually is. You couldn't have anything more catastrophic than the 12 licenses that have been given out already. So you're right, Kush, it's not seen in its totality because all the maps are not on one location, which is what I said to the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water continually every time I've picked up the phone and spoken to them, is the lack of transparency by having proper overlapping maps that show the complexity of the impact here. And they don't do that. They've refused to do that.
Kush, question from me, mate.
Yeah.
Are they fixed bottom or are they floating turbines? Second part of the question is, are you guys at a feasibility stage? Have they announced it in declaration? What's your location down the line of that at the moment?
The feasibility stage, I probably shouldn't, I won't answer it because I haven't got the exact answer. Where we're at is everything's getting done behind the scenes. So with the one of the groups here is called Tas Power Democracy, and they're very active in the research and the petition and the rewrite of where we're all going. So as far as the feasibility, I would say no to the ones on this side. But again, back to what Michael said about Port Fairy, yes, you know, if you're going to talk Bass Strait.
I know they've gone to feasibility, but I didn't think that you had yet gone to feasibility study this, but it's a declared area.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It was one.
It's a declared area, but it hasn't gone to feasibility studies. And are they floating or are they fixed bottom? Do you know?
I don't see. I haven't seen any information that's disclosed that. Actually, I haven't seen any.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting one from the Tasmanian side. So if you look at the submissions, I think there's about 300 submissions, but like the Clean Energy Council is obviously representing a lot of these developers, and even the one interested developer have said about 85 to 95% of the initial zone was not only not suitable for fixed, it was not suitable for floating, which is just mind-boggling how they could even think that this was a good idea with the current technology. And that's coming from the group that actually, represents all these developers. So I don't understand how the minister and an entire department could even think that was a good idea.
There's no viability for it, of course.
No viability.
Alex, that it just go back and I think to myself, it's a deliberate overreach of the government on these things, so they can demonstrate that they've pulled it back and we've listened to the community, because we wanted to put 3,000 in, but we're going to go and put 1,000 in, and so you've been so successful through your process and through your whinging and being the squeaky hinge on the gate. You know what I mean? So it's just an overreach, and the oversupply of electricity, I can only imagine, Kush, is just to power the AI, which is coming, and you got a lot of companies around the world tuning into that at the moment, which is going to. Like, I work in construction. I've worked on data centers before, and it chews up a lot of energy, much more than people realize. So, I mean, there's two factors there that we need to be aware of, and I'm pretty sure Alex and Martine, I don't know you, Kush, I haven't had a discussion with you before, but let's just be aware of that. It's always going to be an overreach. It's always going to be, they're not going to, like in our area, and I'll get to this later, but they're going to say it's this big. Hold on, there you go. Wait a minute. There you go. It's this big, reduce it. But my feeling is it, and I think you all agree, it'll grow back out to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to come in there.
Sorry, I'm going to just say, we might just have to cross over to get Ben Abbott to talk about his area in just a moment, because we may run out of time. Please finish your sentence, Kush, but we'll just have to move on just a second.
Just 2 points to where Ben went on the AI. Like the former Google CEOs running around saying we've got to threefold the whole world's energy to run the supercomputers. But there's also another process of that. There's a chance they might be making synthetic fuel. And I don't know anything about it yet, but it's just been triggered to me only last week, and we'll look into that. So there's always, you can see they put the smoke screen. What's the bad thing? We're all arguing about a stadium down here. The Moranis link's is the one that's going to send Tasmania bankrupt. And the other thing that we don't mention, I've mentioned the salmon, but we also have over 20 oil and gas rigs being decommissioned, possibly left to rot. Yeah. So you're talking Bass Strait. It's possibly about to be a disaster, and the whales that have been coming along the coast of late over the last 5 to 7 years, I suppose, in Tassie, maybe longer, but it's not unusual to go out there and see a rail now. Well, they were never here when we had the paper mill and the pulp mill and trioxide, when the waters were all red and the foam from the pulp was coming in, which everyone was disgusted. But when those companies came to town, especially the pulp mill, they employed 3,000 people and a city got built around it. And the community, a lot more community minded. Where the companies come in, they generally, they say the jobs will be all fly in, fly out, whatever. There'll be no local benefit, really.
No, there's never a local benefit.
So, sorry for that, but.
No, that's fine. I think that these thorough discussions bring up issues that we may have also heard relevant information from in our areas, and joining the dots is so important. That's why having this discussion is vital. So thanks, Kush. Ben, would you like to kind of introduce the Hunter area that you're representing, and you can talk about that from Port Stephens and how you came involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Martine. Thanks, Kush. Can't believe I got on before Alex. But so there we have the Hunter Zone, as you can see. Thank you, Martine. The extended suspended areas are the ones that are faded with the dashing. They still haven't revoked those areas. So the Hunter offshore wind zone is about not quite a third, around about a third in the lower portion of that. So if you go to where the D is and strike, go perpendicular across to there, that's the area that's been the feasibility license has now been offered to Equinor Ocean X, but Ocean X, yeah, that's it. Perfect. 22 Ks, about 22 Ks off Port Stephens, the closest point. And so how I became involved some time ago now, I'd say probably almost on just, it's actually nearly 3 years ago. I heard about it, but about 2 years ago, I started getting involved and asking some questions, and nobody had any answers. Anyway, there was a bit of a ruckus going on. There's sort of people talking about it. I asked a lot of questions. There was a Facebook page, and then one of the local guys, a guy called Troy Radford, who's the head of he's president of the Game Fish Club here, turned up on one of my construction sites I was running, only a small site, but yeah, we had this big long conversation. Went and met with the local MP, lady called Meryl Swanson, Labor MP, and anyway, Troy called her out. I was just very, I took my 2 young lads along, and I was very green to the whole thing. And Troy
didn't do an Alex.
I said, get Chris Bowen up here. Let's have a chat. So she did. Anyway, so less than a week later, I had an email in my inbox saying you're invited to a meeting with Chris Bowen. There's 20 of us at one of the local clubs. There was a bit of a furor out the front. There was protesting locals. It was covered reasonably well by the local media. There was a lot of heat. Chris Bowen slipped into the back door, and
that's not like him at all. What? Blacked out vans and buses and hiding behind chain link fences. Doesn't sound like Blackout Bowen at all.
So he was very convincing. He was very convincing to start with, and then we got to a guy called George Trinkler, who is very involved with the Game Fish Club, and said, George just piped up and he said, "Do you know what the car park is?" It's one of the most famous game fishing zones in all of Australia, probably quite well renowned around the world. To be honest with you, I'm not a game fisherman, so I knew what it was, but I didn't have an intricate knowledge. I had no idea. So it's very obvious to us from that, and I could go in depth with it, but I know I'm respectful of the time, and this other guy wants to talk. But we're very aware from that they hadn't done any research. They'd put, and as Chris said before, and I've been repeating the same thing again and again for years now. They've put the cart before the horse. And there's been no research. They've done a desktop study. They've seen some wind off some websites they've got, and that's it. So that's how I got involved. Another guy started the page that we've got, and he's now stepped away. He's following his passions, and that's fine. But I ended up being admin before I knew it, and leading the group. I mean, we've got a great group here. Where we're at the moment, they're offshore.
Would you like to tell them the group you are part of there, so people may be able to go and join and support that?
Yeah. Thanks, Martine. No Offshore Turbines Port Stephens. So as it was previously in the green area, and how good is it they put it green? Let's do colours, right? But the green area was going to support somewhere between 300 and 340, I believe, floating turbines, 260 metres tall. Okay, visible, almost all visible from 22 k's out to about 45 k's out. They've reduced that zone. We've now recently heard that Chris Bowen's said, and I don't see it in writing, but apparently it's been reported that Chris Bowen's saying there's no other proponent's going to get anything. It's just going to be one zone, and if the current proponents who have been offered a feasibility license, I think they had a provisional feasibility license about this time last year offered to them, but they've now had that. They had a 90-day extension of the, I think it's 14 or 28-day offer.
And who's the proponent there, Ben? Who's the proponent?
Equinor.
Ooh, know them?
Yes, mm-hmm. we share a common foe, right? So they've now just, I think it was a week or two ago, announced that Chris Bowen's going to give them another 90 days extension to make a decision. So
love how the government can change the goalposts to whatever they want, make it as wider as they want for them, And then when we try and kick a goal, it's like, oh, sorry, we closed the net today.
Come on, Martine. You know from the very start of all this, it's just a choose your own adventure book. If we turn to the right or we turn to the left and there's a door closed, then we'll just draw another door into the picture, and we'll open that and we'll go through there and we'll follow the path of least resistance. And if that path of least resistance means throwing extra money behind it, is spruiking one way or the other. But recently we've heard a lot in the local area from the local unions talking about a lot of jobs. So apparently 3,000 jobs and so on and so forth. And you remember when we were down in Canberra, it actually attracted a lot of attention. I started talking about that, which I've been talking about for 12 months, but someone jumped onto it and I said, well, there's not going to be the jobs. There's no job. They're not the tailored skill set in the local area to be able to throw to that. And once that project's completed, those 3,000 jobs, the only place, if they do place people from locally, there's future jobs for them are going to be fly in, fly out, or at best, if not overseas, over the other side of the country. So we don't, that created a whole bit of a kerfuffle. Unions are now pushing really hard. There's a whole sort of undercurrent of organisations and people saying, oh, we need this, and criticising the government, saying, well, what do you mean you've cut the area down to 1/3 of the original project because this is just going to be amazing for the country? Well, you know what? Great, 3,000 jobs that might last for a few years is very, very short-sightedness. We've got an ecotourism sector here in what we call the Bay, right? This is Nelson Bay and in the peninsula we live on, that is just helps this area thrive. Like, I mean, I'm an NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. No, not in my backyard, not on your backyard, but for the right reasons. It's not because, I go out and I don't like the look of them. Yeah, I won't like the look of them, but the degradation to the sea floor and just remember they're floating turbines. They're very much in their very early stages of sort of development, and they don't see that they've, we're producing about 40%, which is better than onshore turbines. Okay, around about average 40%. So the rest of the time we're paying for electricity from somewhere else that's taking into account the construction of the maintenance of those somewhere between 100 and 150 turbines. So we're paying. So I think it's 60 to 70% of your power bill pays for poles and wires, right? So that's the infrastructure for the electricity to get to you. So we're going to be paying.
That's the hidden cost that people don't understand. You've just brought that up, is the new grid that has to be put in because it's intermittent supply, and that's what most people do not comprehend. Is there's a whole new network. Kilometers
of power lines and stanchions and so on, that with 500 should be a 500-meter exclusion zone, because if it's not, that the current of electricity runs through those power poles can penetrate your body and actually cause you grievous bodily harm. And that's a whole thing we need to follow up some stage, and once things are announced. So
I think I mentioned that before.
Sorry.
I thought I have mentioned this before, that a whistleblower came and spoke to me, and he's worked in the wind turbine industry for 20 years. And he said that the 4-kilometre radius is the kill zone. So we're talking about, that's on land for much smaller turbines. So he said you could extend that out easily to 5K radius, but possibly 6 with prevailing winds. He said anything within that 6-kilometre radius is in the kill zone. I have put this forward to the government numerous times. I have asked them why they haven't addressed this. OHS issues here right to the hilt, not only for the threats. They're saying to fishermen that's okay, you can go in there where these high voltage cables are and go in and fish and put your lives at risk. I'm like, go and read your insurance policies first, because I'm pretty sure this won't be covered.
It won't be covered. Look, that's not to say anything about the professional fishermen losing all of their grounds. I mean, the professional fishermen, the catch and the provision of food for Australians in that whole zone. There's endemic species that, I think something like 80% of flathead that end up in Sydney fish markets are taken from within the actual zone. Game fishing, longline tuna, like you're talking about, and we've heard this from Victoria before. We're talking about food bowls of Australia. Okay, I'm not even going to touch on the salmon down in Tasmania, but the food bowls of Australia, the regional areas that actually have apparently pulled their weight when it comes to energy production in the past. So you're going to pull your weight again, and we're gonna just lump this crap on you. I don't know. I could keep on going on and on.
Ben,
Sorry.
what was the consultation? Let's go back and I want to recap because a lot of people haven't heard the story about the consultation or the no consultation process for the Hunter region. What did that look like for you guys in your area?
One meeting that I believe about 6 to 10 people turned up to through the middle of the day on a weekday. How
much notice were you given?
I don't know because I didn't even know about it. Apparently there was something put out somewhere that I wasn't aware of. I would have taken the day off work, and I've taken enough days off work to address politicians and the like, and I'll take more off. But there was a few people turned up. Apparently there was one or two that was for it. And you know what? There are some people who are for it, but not many. Not many.
Look, indoctrination and cognitive dissonance runs strong in the force of those ones that are on the green agenda.
Yes.
Thanks, Ben, for that synopsis. I am going to get Alex O'Brien. Let's talk about the Illawarra, what's going on there, what your consultation process looked like, and where things sit for feasibility studies.
Yeah, look, I think basically where we're at now, the zone was declared in June last year. Applications for feasibility licenses closed in August. And despite a lot of questions being sent the minister's way, there was a lack of transparency in terms of what was happening. So, we still are unsure as to what's happening. The only potential interested developer, Blue Float, just before the election requested that the government pause issuing the feasibility license. And still post-election, we haven't heard anything. Now, we know the company's in a bit of strife, around the world. Their CEO founder stepped down, the parent company CEO founder stepped down. If you look at LinkedIn, they've shed about 36% of their workforce. They've cut a dozen projects globally. I don't really see that as a great sign for, issuing a feasibility license to a company who's obviously got some issues that it's still trying to resolve. But, I think that's the same with a lot of these companies as well that we've seen. They've gone through a pretty challenging environment in terms of increasing costs and, pressure there.
Internationally.
So it just, I don't see why a company would want to take on such a complex project like what they've proposed off the Illawarra. So, and look, we know they did receive major project status from the department as well for their Gippsland project, which basically, means that the government assists them, to speed up that process. But look, I think we're just, kind of continuing to ask questions, and we've sent off a number of freedom of information requests, about 30 in the last couple of weeks, to try and get some answers. And we've tried contacting our, the minister and, our local MPs. We've asked for debates and, time to meet, and we've been declined throughout the process. So, which is really disappointing. But again, even with the inquiry, we saw that they tried to bury that before a long weekend after 11 months. Which again, these inquiries are supposed to be there to hold power to account and to have transparency. And it's really disappointing for all coastal communities who are concerned that they would try and bury what was such an important inquiry for so many people. But again, I think that backfires on them. I think it makes them look like they're trying to cover the truth. And that's why, we're just going to continue to, keep fighting. But our consultation was poor. And I think, it was great to catch up, with all of you as well and talk about our shared experiences. But, they put these at times that weren't appropriate. We have about 20,000 people who commute to Sydney each day. I'm one of them who could not meet any of those daytime sessions. And they just weren't really at appropriate times. And a lot of people didn't receive, the mail as well that was informing them of the consultation times. The panel they put together, it was just the most inadequate panel. There were no experts in our opinion that were on that panel that actually understood the technology that they wanted to put on, off the coast at a scale that was unprecedented. And, despite the concerns on, the environment and also the fact that they pushed the zone closer to Cronulla without consulting the Sutherland Shire, which is another huge issue in terms of the fact that this consultation was just a sham. But
that's great PR there, isn't it?
But they didn't even consult them. So,
no.
Which just shows, my other thing was when you look at, again, the fact that they came out and said, we consulted the community, we pushed the zone off 20 kilometres. Now, the evidence is there that the government had been advised that the zone should be 20 kilometres off. It was never going to be 10 kilometres off. This was their way of presenting themselves as consulting the community. We've listened to your concerns, they've said, and we've pushed it further off. So why did the department receive advice that it should have always been 20 kilometres off? Why did Emily Scavetti, the former CEO of OceanX, months before the zone was declared, tell our local publication exactly what the zone would look like? She said it would be 1,000 square kilometres and 20 kilometres off. So what type of information is being shared behind the scenes, out of the public? And this is our problem. Look, I work in an industry of, in wealth management. I've been part of an organisation that set up one of Australia's first solar farm, managed funds. They sound great, but at the end of the day, these things are driven by profit. Once you start a feasibility phase, these developers are spending $200 million. Now, I can tell you, no matter what the environmental risks are, they're going to push ahead and continue with these projects. They're not going to waste that type of money. They're not going to share the data as well for independent, review. And the reality is, it's not a fair fight. And that's why, we have to continue to, expose them as much as we can. And, that's all we can do at the end of the day.
I think you've pinpointed the tactics of deception, smoke and mirrors, and when given an answer that was insightful and directing towards knowing local information when we had our consultation process, when we asked that, like Ben has given that, when we asked about how many animals are you recognizing that are endemic and not found in any other area of either Australia or Western Australia, not one single species could be talked about by the consultants when they came. And when you talk about smoke and mirrors, how many, can I ask, Alex, in the consultation processes that you went through, how many proponents were in the room and how many investors turned up to give their schmoozing advice to others in the room? Did you have that, or was that just us over in WA?
Yeah, from the accounts we had, there was no representation from the developers in the room. So, again, I think they'd be, very brave coming to the Illawarra and putting anything on, to be honest with you, because there are a lot of upset people. But we do know this is the other, part of this story, which was unbelievable, that the Blue Float put an environmental referral study during the consultation period before the consultation had even ceased. So the community was a bit concerned that they had already started the process as if that zone was going to go ahead, as if the community's voice did not matter. And in that, Martine, Blue Float identified 100 endangered and threatened species in that zone, which again just kind of speaks volumes to just how crazy this development is, but how lack of care these developers and the government actually have for such highly sensitive marine ecosystems.
It also seems to be that there's collusion going on when a proponent and investors seem to enter a room and know what's going on at the stage where there's consultation with the community, which is what it should have been, but it wasn't. It was a box ticking event.
That's right.
You've just pointed that out. How is it that we can still allow this government to get away with it? There's no accountability unless you go back to complaints and compliance. Because under compliance and putting forward a complaint against compliance is the only way that they will be held accountable. So it would be the federal government itself that would have to investigate themselves, correct?
That's right. Oh, and the other option is, legal challenges. We know that's worked to quite some success with some groups that we're aligned with in Australia, and that's
and overseas.
Good. Yeah, exactly. So, and we know, our friends in Green Oceans, have started, another legal case there, and this is what we have to do. It's unfortunate that grassroots organisations have to go down this path, but if governments just refuse to listen, and if developers are just all they care about is profit, then what other option do we have?
It's interesting that they've put Murray Watt now. They've shuffled tenure aside, saying that she was someone who's allowed the culling of thousands of protected species in koalas. That they've shuffled her aside in light of the legalities that are coming at them from the environmental sector. Now they've got Murray Watts there, who's well-versed in legal matters. Do you think that's a coincidence, Alex? Do you think that was quite well planned by the federal government?
Yeah. Oh, look, personally, I think I think the big issue with Tanya Plibersek was that obviously she went against the Port Hastings decision, which I think hurt them as well in terms of the offshore wind movements. I think it was the right decision on her part, most definitely. But I think Murray Watt is seen as a bit of a sharper operator as well. So he seems to be able to get things done. And, there was obviously some personal issues with Albanese and Plibersek as well. So it does make sense from that point of view that they've put someone in there that can get things done. But, yeah, it's just kind of, we'll just have to wait and see what the move is on offshore wind.
What are the major concerns for the area there in the Hunter? What's the main impact that they're concerned about?
For the Hunter?
The Illawarra.
Oh, sorry, Illawarra. My apologies.
Sorry. Look, we've done environmental surveys, I should say. The environment came at the top of our surveys. But look, I think what we've also done, we've put a group of engineers together who have done their own costings as well. And the economics is a huge issue. We know that, floating offshore wind is very expensive. We know the wind capacity in the Illawarra is not that great. It's similar wind capacity to Goulburn, but you're going to pay 5 times the amount for a project. And then you're going to expect BlueScope Steel to pay 10 to 15 times their current energy bill. It's just madness. It makes no economic sense. And I think, there were initial dreams of being able to create a green hydrogen export industry. Martine, like the very first thing we talked about was be wary because, there's probably plans, in Bunbury as well. And, there clearly was. But, to put all that money into these, fantasy, projects, where now, they're failing. Like 99% of green hydrogen projects haven't, moved past concept stage in Australia. So
they're just not getting any traction, are they, Alex?
Sorry?
None of this hydrogen stuff's getting any traction at all.
No.
No, it is here in WA. They've already been given pre-approval, so they've been given $2 billion startup.
Wow.
Yeah,
One starting down here as well.
Yeah, Keat Kalbarri Beautiful is right under fire.
I know
Yeah.
Cal Barry was under a fair bit of heat with a hydro. I was talking to him,
Yep.
you know, way back when I had some contact with him a year or two ago, trying to share some messages and so on. That was the hydrogen was the main driver of the whole lot over
Oh
there.
yeah, absolutely. The whole project is based on green ammonia, and the fact that it's one of the most pristine rock lobster rookeries and production areas in WA is absolutely an abomination to even suggest such a thing. I'm going to kick off straight into Gippsland, and I'm just very briefly going to go over this. My apologies to those from the Gippsland area. So basically, there has been 12 feasibility license granted for offshore wind turbine projects in this zone. I'm going to call out the ones that you can see here, which are High Sea Winds Proprietary Limited, Gippsland Skies, we've got Blue Mackerel North, we've got Kutwut Britalang. That sounds Australian, doesn't it? Orsted Offshore by 2. So we've got Orsted has 2 offshore wind projects. Star of the South, know that lot. Aberdrala, Australia. Gosh, where do they come up with these names? Gippsland Dawn, Navigator North Project, Kent Offshore, and the Great Eastern Offshore Wind Farm Project. So when it comes to this area, my gosh, are they getting hit hard? One thing I will share, which I can't encourage people enough, is there is in July going to be further consultation processes with the proponents. So there is 3 locations and dates here. I want everyone that is in that area in Victoria or anyone that can get to that zone during July to do a screenshot of that and see if you can go and give them some support, because at this point, good old Victoria is still smoking the pipe dream that's not so green. And their waters, especially, know that they're adjacent to what's happening in the Bass Strait, are in great risk. If this goes ahead, they have got, I don't have words for that. I'm at a loss to see what's going down there in Gippsland. And again, I do apologise for not being able to get someone onto that show. Hopefully in the future we can. I'm just going to quickly jump over to Bunbury. This top area was the initial proposed area, and then the wisdom kicked in and they realised that, wait a second, this is one of the busiest cargo vessel shipping areas and lanes for the west coast of Australia. And they thought that's probably not a good decision. So what we'll do is we'll put a great ruddy pathway right in the middle, and both the whales and the vessels can go in the same area, because that's a genius idea, is to try and corral whales through a very narrow area where a lot of shipping vessels are going to be, because shipping vessels are not they are historically known to cause the greatest impact of whale death in the world. So that was a genius idea. Then we've got down to 2 proponents. Let's look here. So we've got Zone 1 and Zone 2, or Part 1 and Part 2, as you can see here. So on the east is Part 1, and out further into the water is Part 2. We'll talk about what we discussed a little earlier, Alex, coming up to the next one, which is where this lovely little zone is where the 2 proponents are going to be involved in this. So this is the Bunbury offshore wind area here that's being given a license. Then we have preliminary feasibility licenses going to 2 other proponents, which is, one is the Bunbury offshore wind again, but there is another one which is called Westwood Wind Project, which is strange because Westwood Wind Project is actually not a company, and all we can see that there's a parent company that goes to West Wind Project. So West Wind is a company that's registered to have an offshore in WA, but not Westwood. So it's very strange that the DCCEEW has stated this, and yet we can't find who they are. But I will go back because I love this transparency. to here, they're showing this is the area. And if you coincide to, and they're saying this is the north area, right? So the north area coincides with, sorry, my apologies, to the east side, which is part 1 at the very top closest to the beach. So that's the north area. And then they're saying in the south, they're going to have proponents that have a crossover. They've got to work out where their crossover is. Can anyone see a southern area that's being transparently given specifics on the zone that the government has said these projects are? I can't see it. Can anyone see that?
No.
No? No. So what's interesting is that they've said that there's a southern area, but the southern area isn't indicated whether it is in part 1 or part 2. So it would be still in that same zone that's closest to the beaches, where, oh, lo and behold, in the whole process, I'm not even worrying about going back to the consultation process, which was the biggest load of fraud put forward by the government to say that they had a consultation process when all they did literally is refer everyone back to the government website. And the only people that were talking in the room with real answers were investors and proponents. So basically, it was a promotional event for the offshore wind industry itself. And of course, when I didn't like the way that people were being treated in the community, especially elderly people, and I got up and knocked on a door and said, "Excuse me, everyone wants a mic, everyone wants Q&A," exactly like you actually promoted it and said you were going to do. But oh, funny enough, the government changed the goalpost again. Funny how they do that. So what happened is that the experts, and the whale experts in particular, were in the room. So Bunbury is known for its cetacean research. So we have resident dolphins that have been researched for many, many years by universities. That research place, the Dolphin Discovery Centre, kind of collapsed just at the same time that this was all going ahead. It's been bumped up and given some money, but the concerning thing is during this time of the area being declared and now moving forward with feasibility, not only has it been declared by a peer-reviewed report that the Bunbury and Geograph Bay area is a birthing zone for humpback whales, but also they are now researching into the southern right whale. It is a birthing and nursery zone. So many babies are born in that area, and those mothers and their daughters keep returning back to their area to birth in that zone, right where the offshore wind turbine projects are, right in that area. Now, in the last 2 weeks, what's come out is that the information for the EPBC in the protection plan for protection of the southern right whale is completely incorrect, because they have it down that southern right whales reproduce or have a gestation period of 12 months, when that in fact is not correct. It's 16 months, which means that the migration and the off-breeding research, the off-breeding season research and the breeding research is all incorrect, and it has to be revisited. This affects not just us here in Western Australia, but obviously you guys on the East Coast, because the southern right whale area kind of merges down towards South Australia and Victoria. And we know that these populations cross over. Some stay more local and go out to sea, others go back down to Antarctica. So there's a lot more research that's required. And from what it seems like in the research, we may never know some of the movements at this point of the southern right whale. Now, many of you may have seen the interview that I did with Megan Lapp. Megan Lapp is regarded as one of the world experts on offshore wind turbines and the implications on marine environment and the laws, and she has been involved in this in Congress in the USA for quite some time, more than 10 years. I don't know how she's kept her sanity. God bless you, Megan. But when we discussed at length, and then I have further investigated, it is known that the northern right whale will be the first known whale extinction before it's even happened, because they've gone past their threshold of population sustainability.
Shocking.
So to say that it's essential that we have to protect the southern right whale, because if they go down the same road with construction and pre-construction and operation interference, and the death rates that are happening in the northern hemisphere start with the southern right whale, then the entire population of right whales will be extinct planet-wide. That is my mission, is to make sure that that does not happen here, not on our watch. And I can say there's a lot of things. I fight for the rock lobster industry. I fight for recreational fishing. I fight for commercial fishing. We are aligned with Keep Kalbarri Beautiful and many, many other groups in Western Australia that are pushing back against this green ideology BS. And to put at risk these animals that were here long before us and should remain here whether we're here or not. We have an obligation under our watch of stewardship and protection of these species that cannot protect themselves. And Murray Watt, this is a call out to you, this is on your watch. They know this. They already knew that there was a birthing zone declared in the Geograph and Bunbury offshore wind area. I have seen humpback whales give birth myself along this area, and many, many other fishermen and people that are residents have also. So all I can say is that from my perspective here, I'm going to go the whole way and go down with the ship, and nothing will stop me. It's disturbing to think that with all the known information and research statistics, 5,000 whales, dolphins and porpoises have died in 5 years in UK waters adjacent to offshore wind turbines. It's only just now, 5 years later after this mass death, that the government is now investigating and putting under scrutiny offshore wind industry. Disturbing.
Not good.
Because whale decline and cetacean decline on this is not only an indicator, but it's talking about the collapse of ecosystems, because whales are essential to the health of global or planet-wide marine ecosystems. They're essential part of that, and without that, for them missing in food chain, in the structure of the community of the marine sector, we're looking at some pretty bad escalation of extinction rates of different animals. In particular, I mean, we've talked about this before, that the scallops decline for the fishermen has gone down by 50% in 3 years. So in another, 2 to 3 years, that entire population of scallops will be of such decline, not only will the fisheries be closed, but they will be extinct.
Martine, you talk about scallops, and so scallops and mollusks generally are the filters of the sea. So, yeah, you might have a certain population, but everything like that, every mollusk, every lobster, every cetacean, and so on and so forth, they have a valuable. 1 second.
Zip it, people.
Sorry, I got a family. How dare kids make noise?
How
But
dare they?
every single organism within these zones need to be looked at. They're not. We have zero confidence that these things are going to be looked at, and looked at. Their intricate relationship with each other. Okay.
Yeah, the interdynamics of species. It's well known. It's been researched for a long time.
Yeah. So the interdependence of this, it's absolutely blows my mind that, and we've been told by the government, right? We've been told with one of the meetings we had with the proponent, we asked him, so they're not allowed to meet with us anymore until they sign, right? That's Chris Bowen's directive. And that was 8, 10, 12 months ago that came down. But we've been told by the government themselves that the studies will never be published to the public. They'll never be in public hands will never have access to them. They'll go straight from the proponents. And look, you've got to understand, proponents are big business. They're probably going to do a reasonable job on their studies, right? Let's hope they do. Who knows? But then they get to present the data in a certain specific way to the government. Guess where that data and guess where all that, I'd love to see some baseline stuff. I'm sure they could give us some baseline stuff. But anyway, they've got to get their baseline. They've got to then do their, how things are affected above the baseline after that. That all that information that goes straight to the Minister of Environment. That goes to Mr. Watt, your mate, Mr. Watt, for one person to make one decision, and they turn around and say, "Yep, guess what? Chris Bowen signs on the line." It's a very narrow. I don't want to use the word secretive, but that's all that comes to mind.
I think the word collusion could be used.
Oh, goodness, don't. How dare you?
I'll go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not a process that's open to any criticism. They're doing their best to shut us all down. And, because why? We're making a little bit of sense in this whole thing.
Yeah.
When you talk about unbiased evidence, unbiased based data, there is no data that has put this forward. We know that there are blade sponges out there that have never been researched since the 60s. These are only found in Western Australia and in the offshore wind turbine zone. There is no further research that was done. That's just some basic examples. But what I will say is that it's not going to be impartial science and data, because the University of Western Australia has taken $10 million plus or thereabouts, allegedly, in grants from the federal government to research and development offshore wind, floating wind, and a whole bunch of suction caps to adhere to the substrate of the seafloor. So they are also going to be the ones doing the surveys. Now, can you imagine those that have taken that amount of money from the federal government is then going to put forward true, unadulterated, pure fact and science? Or is it going to be put through a modelling? Is it going to be skewed as much as they want?
You couldn't imagine, there might be some transparent, honest people, but you don't typically find too many dogs that
not universities anymore. They were all bought off.
Well, universities are businesses at the end of the day. How many vice chancellors get paid $1 million a year? Like, it's just unbelievable. And a lot of these universities are bleeding cash, given the changes with migration and, the impact to COVID as well. Again, it's in their interest to, find huge amounts of research funding, and the offshore wind industry is, providing them, that opportunity. So naturally, they're going to be interested in that, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So to sum it up, I've got a question, and it's going to be a fail or a pass. So I've got 4 questions for all of you. We'll start with Kush, go to Alex, and then Ben. So in the consultation process, was it a fail or a pass?
Oh,
Kush.
a 5-star failure.
5-star failure. Fantastic. We have a whole new level of rating.
That's a 5-star failure for the Illawarra.
Okay, and yourself, Ben?
Fail.
5-star or just like 4.5?
12-star. It's a catastrophic failure.
Transparency. Kush.
Well, just matches the failure answer. There's none.
Hey,
absolutely none.
Alex.
Failure.
Transparency from the government.
Absolutely none.
0 transparency. Failure.
Social license. Kush. Is there a social license? Yes, pass, or failure? That's a no-go.
No, there's no social license. You've got to have a social license. You've got to have a consensus, and you've got to have the community informed to give that social license. That's the thing. There's no informed community. There's pro or against. all of us that are against it's hard to get the proper information that they're doing it. So we've got to look at it's research that we do that we can oppose it. But the opposing the project, as Ben and Alex has highlighted, is they don't give you the information. You know,
No, they
don't give you the information. The Premier
Alex.
announced after the. Sorry to just cut in. I've probably taken too long, but Craig, specifically after his media release on Wednesday, they interviewed the Premier and the Leader of Opposition, which are both in lockstep. So there's no Liberal Labor Party, and the Premier said costings for the Moranis link will come out after the election.
Watch my eye roll. Alex, social license, fail, pass.
Definitely no social license in the Illawarra. And if Minister Bowen wants to find out himself, we're happy to have him down here.
We would love to host him too. I know I'm so popular with him. He likes to view me and my friends behind chain link fences with all of his paparazzi around him in high vis and in dress ups with boots and cars that can swiftly make him out of those areas that he doesn't want to be seen. Yeah, I'd love to. Ben, is there any social license where you guys are?
So this is a little bit, so essentially absolutely no, right? There's no social license on it. There are very small pockets of people who are positive about it, but west of us in the Hunter, like if you know the East Coast, so we're talking 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 Ks west of here, we have coal mine, like coal-based production and so on and so forth. So the people who are pushing for it are the communities from there saying, what are we going to do for jobs? So the unions are talking up jobs and they have a push from that side of things. And we know we know where unions are. They go hand in glove with the government of the time.
They sure do. Well, the last one is, were any issues that were raised ever addressed? Kush.
Ever addressed? No issues that have been raised have really been addressed. There has been people get a few answers, but they don't want to answer any questions. They said they would. There's people out there. One guy's put masses of questions to the minister, all knowledgeable questions, and they just avoid it. All avoided. Door shut on you.
No, still a lot of questions on cost that still haven't been answered. No modelling's been revealed. So, and that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of questions that they refuse to answer or they simply just don't know the answer to.
Ben?
Well, let me take you back to the whole idea of the overreach. So I can say what I want, but they're going to turn around and say, "Well, no, we listened to you. We've reduced the zone by 2/3." So that's their propaganda there, right? But no, I don't believe we actually even had much of a chance to raise concerns, let alone get some real, significant sort of any answers of significance, any real response out of all of that. So no, but you can see there's other factors at work there as well.
Well, what I can say from the WA perspective on consultation process was catastrophic fail. That would be a terminal failure as far as we were concerned, because it erupted into very heated debate because there was people with such inept answers and people with such a lack of basic information that came to be the experts that the whole thing fell apart before it even started. Transparency. Well, we can see by those maps where it's saying in the north and the south areas that there is no indication or transparency about what's happening whatsoever. At no point have we even been told how many wind turbines will be included in those projects. When it comes to social license, well, this is interesting. Social license, there are a hardcore group that have been sold the green agenda hook, line and sinker. Some have woken up over the last 12 months. some people don't even know that the offshore wind turbine zone is going ahead and they live in the zone. Kid you not. The propaganda has been so good in mainstream media saying that all these proponents have pulled out. So people have believed that the whole thing's been scrapped when it was such lies and deception from that perspective. When it comes to issues addressed, absolutely none, not one single issue that we put forward. I mean, they haven't even addressed the consultation inquiry itself. I mean, how many times, is it 4 times that has been delayed? And then they just had their findings overnight?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. I think there's so much respect for the Australian people when you see a government just go straight ahead and write their own rule book, change the rules as it goes along, and completely disregard the local communities that are going to be directly affected, or actually break their own laws. I think the EPBC Act of 1999 is still in effect, and the international whale treaties we still have signed up to, regardless of whether we're still in the Paris Accord. Look, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a bit of a marathon meeting, but wow, there has been a lot discussed. Love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Martine, for having us. I'm sure we could go on for hours.
Thank you, Martine, for setting up, and gents, Kush, great to meet you, and Alex,
Yeah,
always a pleasure. And Martine, that was a great session. Thanks, mate.